You may not find a group of people more beaming with pride than Canadian horror fans when it comes to the topic of ginger snaps. Really, it just truly a point of pride. It was kind of the little movie that could. Kind of began as this underground cult thing, and it made its way into the mainstream, earned international appeal, and now here we are over 20 years later at this point, and it is regarded as a classic. It is regarded as one of the best werewolf movies, one of the best horror movies of recent years, and certainly one of the most popular Canadian productions. So there's a sense of ownership in that for Canadians. So Ginger Snaps is, something we hold quite dearly. I love the movie. I really like the sequel too, Ginger Snaps 2 Unleashed. But the funny thing is, I had never seen this third film, which is kind of strange, I guess, for someone who enjoyed the first two so much. Both the second film and this film were filmed back to back in the year 2004, or at least released in 2004. I guess kind of the story is that the second film, it just didn't perform as well as it was expected to, and I guess, I don't know, just faith kind of dwindled in this third film. I think it ended up going straight to DVD, but even at that point, it wasn't like in huge circulation. And if we're talking, let's say, 15 years ago, when it was still a normal thing to buy DVDs, rent DVDs. I always found it kind of like hard to find. Like I never like seen this movie in a store on DVD or anything like that. Meanwhile, the first film you could have found anywhere. Like it was very popular and had distribution all throughout the world. This third film, not so much. So I don't know. I just never had just like a general chance to see it, but at the same time, I kind of, I don't know, wasn't like especially interested because I knew the concept, like what it was about. It was a prequel to the first two films, at least sort of. It was a different story taking place in the 1800s in Canada, and I don't know. I never felt the urgency to like really seriously try to track it down because I thought, well, it doesn't really progress the story that I was kind of invested with the first two films. Maybe it'll just kind of feel like a part of our heritage commercial with werewolves, and I don't know, like if it was so poorly distributed and not all this faith was brought into it. Maybe they're hiding something. Maybe it wasn't that good of a movie, right? So that kind of gave me pause, and I don't know, just the years went by, and I never saw it. But guess what? I finally saw it this year for my 31 days of horror movie marathon, and it was an exciting thing to finally get to see the movie because I found it streaming. So I've watched the movie, and I'll say right off the bat, it's actually it's a good movie. It really is, and I mean it's not as good as the first two, which I kind of expected going into it. I had tempered my expectations in that sense, but pretty solid, pretty well done, and I think the concept that they've taken in having it work as this prequel, work in this time frame. This is in 1815 in Canada. I think it's an interesting move and kind of a good one. And I appreciate, of course, that they get the two characters at least maybe somehow related to the characters in the modern movies, some kind of ancestral link, whatever. Both with the same names, Ginger and Bridget. They brought them back, so we have Catherine Isabel playing Ginger, Emily Perkins playing Bridget. So they're back, and that's great. And that's kind of, I don't know, kind of the appeal of those first two movies is that relationship. So, I mean, I would imagine if you're watching a review of Ginger Snaps 3, you've probably seen the first two movies. So, if not, I'll warn some spoilers here. But the way the first two movies worked out, even really actually the first movie, it it I guess had become a difficult thing to explore the relationship between the two sisters further, since of course Ginger is killed in the first film. She fully transformed into the werewolf, and in the second film she appears as kind of like this apparition and things like that. So really, what could they do further than that for a third movie other than kind of go back a little bit and do this prequel? So I think that's a decent workaround in order to kind of give us the relationship that was so interesting and compelling about that, particularly that first movie. So they kind of go back to that with the bond between sisters. So they are playing sisters in this film. They kind of, I don't know, appear mysteriously out of nowhere, reaching this fort that's awaiting some fur and supplies and all that kind of stuff from a ship that has gone to the Hudson's Bay for an expedition. They haven't come back, and they're assumed to be dead or maybe just really late. But it's been 2 months, and supplies are dwindling. Kind of, they're in poor spirits. But these two young women come upon this fort, and they are welcomed somewhat hesitantly, and we soon find out that there's something out there in the Canadian wilderness that poses a much more serious threat than just their dwindling supplies. There's demons out there, which of course we learn to be the werewolves of this franchise. So that's kind of what we're working with here. It's a good concept. I'll say that, and I'll give it credit that, like, I was kind of expecting to be old timey boring kind of movie. Certainly wasn't. It certainly has a lot of scary, intense moments, and some of the stuff that I've come to really appreciate about the series as a whole. Like, we work with practical effects here. There's some good work. K and B actually worked on a lot of makeup effects for the film. No CGI. It's all practical kind of stuff, which is really cool. And they kind of work with, I don't know, the Jaws concept, where what you don't see is kind of scarier than what you do see. So, like, you'll when there's like an attack or something like that, you'll kind of like hear the gunfire, and you'll see kind of the aftermath, but not too hardcore stuff. At least not until kind of the very end, where they kind of go for this big showdown between the survivors and the werewolves, and that kind of climactic scene. But I guess kind of the appeal of these movies is that while they are really cool werewolf movies, they're always kind of working with something else. The first film, of course, it was kind of conceptually taking the werewolf genre and applying it to the journey into womanhood and the curse, literal and figurative, that came with it. The second film kind of dealt with like trauma, and even kind of like hints of like addiction, and kind of like a repressed sexuality a little bit. So always dealing with like interesting themes, and here it's no different. They do deal with quite a few different things. And one thing that kind of highlights right away, that kind of gets your attention, not in really like an explicit kind of way, but in a way that it guides your attention towards sort of like a gender politic kind of thing, where we have these two young women going into this fort occupied with all these men. It's all men, and you kind of think, well, they're in trouble. So there's a little bit of that working in the film, and it definitely touches upon religious fanaticism. There's this reverend character played by Hugh Dillon, who's all fire and brimstone, kind of religious fundamentalist kind of thing, and it also deals with kind of like themes of racism against the indigenous population. There's an indigenous hunter character played by Nathaniel Arcand, who is an ally to this group, but kind of not trusted, not treated well, and we learn more about him, and it does kind of get into like more of like the mysticism of this werewolf lore, where we do kind of find out about the girls, that maybe there is this larger kind of prophecy kind of going on. They tell of the forecoming of the red and the black, and how the Europeans and French they brought with them their diseases and their curses to this land and kind of sullied it in that way. But how everything's kind of going to be decided, the fate of the land is through the survival or lack thereof of the red and the black, which is represented by the sisters. So that's kind of an interesting thing, and kind of when you do kind of think about it in relation to the first film, if these are kind of direct ancestors, how there is this kind of curse and terrible fate that's kind of just destined to befall them. And maybe without trying to give away too many spoilers, things in this prophecy didn't work out quite the way this character was expecting, and maybe things kind of were able to resolve themselves better generations later. So that kind of relates it to the first film a little bit. Not that they go too hard and too focused with that. Like, it kind of leaves you to kind of draw your own conclusions, and mostly it just kind of goes for the scares of a horror movie. Like, there's tense scenes, quiet scenes, good scares, and very creepy moments. Like, the series always, it tends to have some pretty gruesome effects that show up all throughout, and this one's definitely no different. Has some good stuff, and again, I think we have really strong performances from Catherine Isabel and from Emily Perkins. They have great chemistry as these sisters, and I do think, without any other kind of workaround, considering how the first movie ended up, and kind of getting away with returning the Ginger character in the second film by having her, appear as, the kind of ghost apparition, what have you. They probably couldn't get away with that again, so really kind of the only way to explore this relationship further is kind of to do it this way, and that was fine. So I think it worked out the best that way, and I think it's a strong trilogy as a whole, and I can't believe this came out 2004, so we're talking quite a few years since I knew about the movie and finally being able to see it. But however the distribution worked out, I guess they just didn't have enough faith in what turned out to be a really good movie that I really enjoyed. So that's unfortunate, but at the same time, it's really cool that I was able to see the movie again. It was a really exciting thing, or see the movie for the first time, I should say. I was excited to return to this world, return to these characters, and see it with a new angle, with a new light. That worked really well. So definitely recommend the movie. Recommend the whole trilogy. I'm still beaming with pride over Ginger Snaps. So, good on you, Canada. Thanks for making such a cool series of movies. That's my review. Ginger Snaps back The Beginning. So we're doing 31 days of horror all throughout the month of October 2021 on this channel. Be sure to stay tuned for more. Be sure to comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until next time, stay scared.